Hey everyone, Ashley here from Wellness Hub by Ashley. Just popping on to do another video today. And today I said I would do a video a little bit more about trauma and what it is, and just kind of go into a little bit more detail about it. So I have here, what is trauma? So this is kind of my take on it, and this is how I put it across to people. But if an experience overwhelms your ability to cope, then it is a trauma. A lot of the time we can minimize our trauma, and in sessions I find when I start to talk to a person and we talk about what's going on right now for them, and sometimes we go back in time about relationships in the past, or childhood and things like that, and what you get is a lot of people, I call it minimizing their trauma. So they might say something, they might pick up on something that happened and they'll say, oh, but that was years ago, or, but, it was a busy house, or there was 5 of us in the house, and, we all experienced the same thing. And, that's very much, my take on that is, you can have 5 people living in a house, 5 children, and everybody can experience more or less the same upbringing, but it is going to affect each one differently. And I think our experience can definitely be minimized when people think about other people that have experienced the same thing. And another thing is as well, when some people are talking about stuff, and they kind of will pick up on something and say, oh, but you're that, that happened years ago, but I'm fine now. Like, looking back now, it really wasn't that bad. And I was watching something one day and I just thought it was a really good way of kind of bringing that person back to that experience. And it was a guy or it was a lady, and she was talking about a situation that she was in, in childhood, and she was, minimizing it and saying, that would, it's years ago, and looking back now, it wasn't that bad. And the guy said to her, well, how many children do you have? And she said she had 4 children. And he said, well, we'll just take your oldest child, for instance. Think back to when she was that age, and I want you to imagine what you went through is now happening to her. And she was like, oh God, it really affected her. And she said, oh God, I don't know what I'd do if that happened to her, or, and he said, well, why was it okay that you experienced it? And I just thought that was a really good way of showing somebody that, what has happened to them, play is important. And, that we don't minimize it, or, when we think of something that happened, go to that age, go to the age you were back then. Because, in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, when you think about it and you go back, it may not seem that bad. But actually for a 5-year-old, 6-year-old to have that experience at that age, can be terrifying. So that's kind of, my message, and that I want to kind of get across to people, that, if it's an experience that overwhelms your ability to cope, cope at that time, no matter what age you were at that time, then it is a trauma. Another thing is, do we need to remember our trauma? And the answer to that is no. And for me, I didn't remember my first experience of trauma. And, I never would have thought that could be true, that you could have an experience that you don't remember and still be affected by it. So a guy, Dr. Gabor Mate, he's a fantastic person in the field of trauma, and I'd highly recommend that you look him up. He specializes in childhood development, but he says we don't have to recall the experience. When he was a baby, his mom, he lived in Budapest, and his mother, there was war, and his mother handed him to a stranger because she didn't know whether she would survive this war or be alive the next day. And he actually didn't see her for a month. And he was only a couple of months old, but it was the start of his life. And he said, we don't have to recall our experiences because the recall memory isn't developed yet, but the emotional implicit memory of abandonment was deep within him. So, I'm not going to go into the science of things, but definitely look him up, because he has so much science and so much, knowledge in the field of trauma, and very much that thing of, our experiences. And, another thing as well about remembering our trauma, when we have a traumatic experience, we can also disassociate in that. And, that's our brain's way of surviving. So, you can have people that come in with an experience and they can only remember bits of it, or they can't piece it all together. And that was their brain's way of surviving. And people can carry that through into their lives, where they can be in certain situations and they just can kind of just disassociate themselves in that situation. Or another thing is, if you're in therapy and you're speaking about a situation, you can start disassociating from the room, where you're going back and you're starting to relive that again. So it's important, I suppose, that you're in a safe place and you feel comfortable. And another thing Dr. Gabo Maid said is, trauma is not the bad things that happen to you, but what happens inside you as a result of what has happened to you. So that, I thought that was, a really good way of explaining it. I'll read it again. So trauma is not the bad things that happen to you, but what happens inside you as a result of what has happened to you. And there is such a big change inside of you. And definitely trauma, it creates a disconnection from yourself. And, why do we disconnect from ourselves? And, we go on in life and we're not really living, our true selves of who we really are, because we're crippled with all this anxiety, depression, overwhelming feelings that, stop us in our everyday life and, affects us every day. And he says it's too painful to be ourselves. So it's too painful, and when we experience trauma, that's what happens, is, it's the body's way of surviving. So that's just a short little video, like it's very short and just going into a small little bit of detail about trauma. And, like I always say as well, when I speak about trauma, it can be quite triggering for people as well. And just know that I am always open to messages. I do a 5-10 minute discovery call as well, that I will just pop on, have a quick little phone call, just chat about what's going on for you, and just see if, if I was a fit for you in your healing journey. And, I'll be completely honest with you if I'm not. I always say this, and anyone that knows me, I always say it to people is, everybody heals in a different way, and what works for one may not work for another. So, it is, important to say, whether I think that you're fit or that I can help you in your journey, and if I can't, maybe I will know somebody that, that could help. So I'm always open to messages, always open to pop on the phone and have a chat. Thank you for listening. Bye.